Here we're graphing a cosine function. So how do we go about graphing a cosine function? Well, I'll come up here. I've given some instructions in the notes. I've given you some notes. So first, rewrite in terms of multiply if you need on the inside. We don't have that problem. Compare to the general form, identify A, B, C, and D. So let's do that. Let's compare to the general form. So I'll bring it down here. Y equals -3 cosine a half x. And right, I just grabbed it from right here, like that. And now we're supposed to compare to the general form, which is A cosine or sine bx plus c plus d. So we can tell, if we expand this a little bit, this is plus 0 because there's nothing in the parentheses, plus 0 because there's nothing outside. Adding 0 doesn't change anything. So it's like there's really a plus 0 there. So we can tell that the c and the d are really 0, the b is really a half, and the a is really -3. So that's the first step compared to those. So next, we find the midline. It's D, and that's the middle of the graph. So what is D? That's 0 for us. So this is the middle of the graph. Let me put that on for us. So the middle of the graph is right there at 0. And then the amplitude, next it tells us about the amplitude. It says the from the middle, A is the amplitude, how much it rises and goes down is A. So what's our A? Our A is 3. So that means our graph is going to go above and below the middle line by 3. So it'll be up here and down here at -3, up at 3 and down at -3. So we have the top and the bottom and the middle now of our graph, kind of like getting a window in which our cosine graph will sit. And notice it's a -3, so it's going to, our cosine graph is going to start on the bottom on that. So let's keep going. What's next to find? So we've got the top and the bottom. So the top and the bottom, we've got the top and the bottom now. And now we go to the period, which is, formula's right here, 2 pi over b. So the period (2 pi over b), and our b is a half. Right there, b is a half. So how do you divide by a fraction? You multiply by the upside down, right? You take that 1 over 2. And you flip it up to become 2 over 1, and you multiply, because dividing is upside down multiplication. To divide by a half is to multiply by 2 over 1, and so that's 4 pi, because this is over 1, and 2 pi times 2, that's 4 pi. So there's the period. The period is 4 pi. So that's the period, which means that is the width of one cycle. That's what period is, the width of one cycle. So what do we do next? Find the horizontal shift. So do we have a well, it's -c over b is the formula. So horizontal shift, -c over b. C is 0, -0 over b. B is a half, but 0 over anything is just 0. So the horizontal shift is 0. So there's no horizontal shift. So it starts at x equals 0, right in the middle. There's no shift. So our graph, our cosine graph, starts right at 0. Now, you know a cosine graph, let me be clear, sine graphs always start, let's say, at middle height. Whereas cosine graphs start at their top for positive or their bottom for negative. We're talking heights now, right? So sine graphs always start in their middle height and go up and down. Cosine graphs always start at the top or the bottom, top for positive, negative for bottom. What do we have? We have a negative cosine graph, remember? So ours is going to start at the bottom. So, and we know it starts at x equals 0 at the bottom. So it must start right here, right? Because this is x equals 0, and this is the bottom at x equals 0. So ours is gonna look like this. It'll start at the bottom, go up, go down, and finish at the bottom, one cycle. And what is the period? That's the width of one cycle. 4 pi, the width of one cycle. So at 4 pi, it's going to be back here again. Halfway through, it's going to go high. Do you see how I figured that out? 4 pi is the width of one cycle. So by 4 pi, it's got to complete one cycle. One cycle for cosine is low, high, low, or high, low, high. For sine, it's middle, high, low, middle. Right? So, and I'll say, or, they can also go high, low, high, like that. So our cosine is negative, so it's this way for negative. It's this way for positive. So there we go. So it's going to go through this point and this point. It's going to go like this. I'm not the best drawer, but it's going to go like that. And then it's going to just keep doing that forever and ever and ever and ever. So there is the graph of our cosine function. And so when you use the tools, just make sure, especially make sure this point and that point, the starting and the ending of one cycle, are matching up. It starts low at its bottom at -3 at x equals 0 because there's no horizontal shift. So it starts at x equals 0, and it starts at its bottom because it's a negative cosine graph. It ends at 4 pi, its first cycle, because 4 pi is the width of one cycle. That's the period. So as you use the tool, make sure that part's good, and then it'll keep repeating forever to the right and to the left forever. So there's how we graph that cosine